This video is all about women's health. So if you are new here, welcome. If you are returning, welcome back. I'm Dr. Kelli. And in this video, I finally got to talk to Kale Blossom. So kaleblossom.com is a resource that was put together by Dr. Rachel and Dr. Carly. So I get to talk to Dr. Rachel and Dr. Carly about, I really wanted to talk to them about thyroid because a lot of clients that I see, particularly with things presenting like anxiety and depression, and it looks like it might be mental health stuff or some other things going on, is really thyroid. So we talk about that, but we also, of course, we touch on all kinds of things women's health related. So I hope that you enjoy this video as much as I enjoyed talking to the creators of kaleblossom.com, Dr. Rachel and Dr. Carly. And if you haven't already done so, if you would please subscribe to my channel, that is very helpful. And if this video, if you like it, please hit the like button. And if you think it would be helpful for anyone that you know, please forward it to or share it with folks because we are trying to help as many people as possible. So thanks for being here. Happy healing. Okay, so I'm so excited to see you, Rachel, Carly. We know mutual people. So I think I've been watching your content in Kale Blossom for a while and just really impressed. And I think that both of you are lovely people. So I'm excited to have you. And I just appreciate you taking some time to talk to me. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting us. Yeah.
Yeah. So I know that you two, I want to talk a little bit about Kale Blossom first before we dive into some other stuff. So I know that you both were working on doctorates. So, Rachel, you were working on your doctorate in naturopathic medicine. Carly, you were getting your doctorate in chiropractic when y'all met, and then went off and did your clinical stuff and got married and had babies and all of that and stayed good friends and then decided to do Kale Blossom. So tell me how that happened, what that's about, and then I think it would be helpful for I know what you can get by visiting kaleblossom.com, but what can other people expect if they want to visit?
Sure. So Kale Blossom was a work in progress for a long time. Funny story, I actually found initial email from, I think it was 2013. This was kind of pre-kids, for me, pre-marriage, when we were still, organizing our lives. And we had this idea that we wanted to start a website, a blog, have this information for women. And of course, life happens. We have more kids, we get married, we move 10 times, right? And so finally in 2019, we both kind of looked at each other and said, let's do this. Had this idea, met with some lovely women who helped us put together Kale Blossom, which is a website that provides free information on all things women's health.
Right, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So, and are you both seeing people in clinical practice still?
We are. And that was the big thing that kind of reignited Kale Blossom for us was because I had been practicing, opened an integrative clinic, co-founded an integrative clinic in Atlanta, and my patient schedule was full. And it's like, I can't see any more patients and maintain my own health and my family's health. What is a way that I can still share this toolbox that I'm so passionate about, that I've seen help others? Carly's right there passionate about it with me. So that was also a big impetus for kind of reigniting that Kale Blossom passion project. So we are currently practicing now. We practice together. Then Carly, I'll let you speak for yourself, but she also has another gig. We have lots of little pet projects and irons in the fire. We're opening a new integrative clinic kind of in our neck of the woods. Interestingly enough, I actually put a letter in my neighbor's mailbox about a year and a half ago, asking if she'd be willing to sell some of her acres. So Carly and her family bought it. So we now literally live across the street from each other on acreage. So
that's so awesome. That's amazing. Okay. And Carly, what's your other project?
Well, I also work part-time with a primary care clinic actually out of California. So I dabble in patient care, of course, part-time. And part of that is with Rachel as well as Kale Blossom.
Yeah. And Carly, are you doing a lot more with nutrition? I know we're all nutrition people, but
Yes, thank you. I should clear that. Yes, I did practice chiropractic out of school for maybe a year, but quickly came to realize that more nutrition, functional medicine, functional nutrition was my real passion.
yeah.
And so it kind of led me, and that's been my area of continued study and practice.
Got it. And I know you're both really passionate about women's health, families, all of that. We love our boys and our men, but we can talk a lot about that. And Rachel, you see everything because as a naturopathic doctor, you are just seeing what all comes in the door, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting how my practice has evolved since I started 12 years ago. It was much more family medicine, women's health, pediatric health, men's health. And it's kind of whittled to really focusing on women's health. Like you said, men's health is super important. I love working with kiddos, but the bulk of my practice is now women's health. And that really came out of not only becoming a mom myself and kind of knowing the hormonal piece and everything that goes into that, but starting to see more and more particular conditions showing up all the time.
Yes.
And it kind of just grows from there. So lots of autoimmune, thyroid, of course, lots of GI dysfunction, a lot of those other booger bear stealth infections too, like your tick-borne illness, Epstein-Barr, even mycotoxin, mold toxicity, all of that stuff. So it definitely is a little bit more of a zebra kind of put your Sherlock Holmes magnifying glass practice on now, but I really love it.
Right. That's why I'm so excited to talk to both of you. But Carly, just tell me too, you're mostly seeing women too and throughout all of it, or
Yes. Okay. So in Rachel's practice, of course, it's mostly women. There's some men too. Yeah. And then it just so happens that in the other practice I work with, it's primary care. There's a mixture, but largely women. And again, it's the same thing that Rachel was just talking about, concerns about chronic fatigue and hormone, thyroid, and so it's kind of running that full gamut there too.
Yep. Okay. And that's what I see. So I see some boys and some men. They come along every now and then for nutritional therapy. And so my background is in clinical mental health. And so I worked as a professor and a researcher, and I got really interested in gut health as it relates to mental health. And then I made the switch to nutritional therapist. About 2019 is when that's where I'm really the most passionate. And I keep seeing things over and over and over again that people think they're having a lot of mental health issues. So they come to me, we're working on the nutrition, we're working on the lifestyle stuff, because I've become really passionate about the quantum healing piece of it. But one thing that they always come and they, and they have like weight issues with metabolic health. They've got, chronic anxiety or depression, anxiety roller coaster, which is sometimes the case. And they're just feeling really lousy kind of all the time, fatigued, awful. And I say, have you had your thyroid checked? Oh yeah, my doctor says my thyroid's fine.
Normal. It's normal.
Within normal limits. And I'm like, okay. So talk to me about your thoughts about thyroid. Let's just start there and how that can present when it comes to you. And then what are some of the things that people can do? One, what can they ask their doctor? They don't even do a full panel. It's not even a full panel. It's just the THS or the TSH and the T4 usually, right? And so
sometimes not even that. Sometimes just TSH. Yeah. Oh. And that's probably one of our biggest passions at Kale Blossom and why we want to continue that. Of course, we see, women in practice that we can help individually, but we know that there are so many stories of women being dismissed where their labs look normal, everything looks great. Yes, you have symptoms. It's just a part of being a woman or just a part of being a mom. Maybe here's an antidepressant. We'll see you again next year. And it's just positioning women in a really, really crummy place. So we always do thorough lab work, and thyroid is a big part of that. Certainly, like you said, TSH, free T4, free T3, both thyroid antibodies, sometimes reverse T3. I found that it's one of those that insurance sometimes doesn't cover. So it's like a cherry on top, but I can find enough information with those other 5 markers. If there's a more peculiar thyroid, then I may go back in and add that or free T3 uptake. But ultimately, those 5 markers are usually the bulk. The other important piece that so many women don't realize it because their doctors aren't telling them, is the thyroid has a diurnal rhythm. So if you don't get your thyroid labs drawn before 10 a.m., so many women, they get their labs drawn at 2 p.m. and then their thyroid, their TSH looks normal. And it actually does. So
Right.
we're missing, all of these women are walking around with really sluggish thyroids. And the other factor, which I think you were kind of alluding to, is the reference ranges for normal, which what is normal anyway, right?
Right.
But the reference ranges for our labs, LabCorp Quest standard labs, are based on a very unhealthy population. TSH ranges should be narrowed. And when we look at a narrow reference range as integrative doctors for not only thyroid, but the other nutrient levels, lipid levels, inflammatory markers, we're catching a lot more dysfunction earlier so that not only we can try to get in and make a change before disease ever has to set up shop, but we're also helping that big patient population that would otherwise be dismissed and said everything looks fine.
Right.
So these people, it's so wonderful. That's the most rewarding part. It's like I've been to so many doctors and no one found it, and now I feel like myself again. It's not that we're rocket scientists. I would love to be, but it's just kind of looking through a little bit more particular and intentional set of lenses.
Right. Yeah. And Carly, what do you think about your thyroid folks?
Yeah, well, just to kind of build on that, a great example is, the lack of clarity with the labs. And, we see patients, yeah, your TSH, all these markers look great. You run the full gamut. And let's just say their antibodies are maybe not through the roof, but present, but everything else looks fine. That still calls for some major intervention before things really get rolling and get started within the body. There's some major inflammation going on or something else. So, kind of everything that Rachel said, but it's just so important to dig deep. And of course, the nutritional part, which I know you're passionate about as well, right? Are women feeding themselves? That's a big one, right? Especially as moms. So,
Right.
attacking it from many different angles. There's so many, pieces to thyroid, not just specifically the thyroid.
And that's
Right.
a good point because conventional medicine too tends to be so reductionistic. And even in integrative medicine, we can be reductionistic and say, oh, it's all thyroid. But when you actually look at the adrenals that are best friends with the thyroid, misery loves company, oftentimes that stress pattern, from either childhood, early adulthood, becoming a parent, working mom, those kinds of things really accumulate. And you have to address the whole picture with the food, the gut, inflammation, all of it. The other thing about thyroid, which is very interesting, especially for women, the mental health piece, which is huge. So many women suffer from low mood, depression, and it's more of a thyroid issue. One of my other side projects on Mondays, I co-facilitate a women's support group. There's 8 women in each group. I do it with a good friend who's a psychologist. We have found when we do lab work on women, thyroid is sluggish. They come in, they get therapy, they're able to use their voice, kind of heal and move through the trauma. Their thyroid always does better. And so with the voice box being right next to the thyroid, we know that mental emotional connection, they're inextricable. So the mental health piece and supporting that, so profound, especially in thyroid.
I love that. And why I also love that is because we train and psychologists, counselors, mental health therapists, all of us are trained to do more of the talking. And I know a lot of therapists will be like, wow, I got to know about the thyroid. Not really. It sounds like you're still able to do a lot with what you know how to do to help people with being able to voice things. And I don't think we can ever underestimate what stress does to the body.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
Right. And those years, my kids are now 17 and 20, and it's still, you still like, but it's nothing. I mean, just those years of, popping a couple of pirate booty and moving on and just not really even having the time to take care of yourself. Even when you're trying to take care of yourself, I think it can be a lot. So that stress is huge. But I do love that, Rachel. I love that you're doing that group. And how can anybody can join that group, or how does that work?
These groups actually have been going, the first one has been going for 4 years, and it's the same 8 women. So, but we're opening 2 new groups, hopefully next year. We're both so busy, psychologists, but it has been probably one of the coolest things I've done as a naturopathic doc my whole career, and healing for me too, to sit with these women in the raw emotion, the realness of life, whether it's marital stuff or health stuff or financial stuff or interpersonal dynamics and family relationships and all of that. It has been so amazing. So grateful to have been a part of it. But I think these group settings are popping up more.
Yeah.
So certainly something that I think women could look out for in their own communities. Absolutely.
Well, it just popped into my head. I was also thinking, we know that when people have infertility issues and they're going through the treatment, they're doing things, but when they join a group and they really learn that they're not alone and that being able to talk through it, that you can, if you had a pill for how many people have successful pregnancies and deliveries after having that kind of experience, everyone would take it. Right. But it's just that connection. So I think it's just powerful.
Very, very powerful.
It's a basic human need, right? Yeah, we need connection.
We do need connection. And so figuring out how they can get that. But I didn't know that can improve your thyroid. That's pretty cool.
It's one of those kind of metaphysical, like, how do we track and quantify the mechanism of action here? And it's one of those things, it's real, there's science there. Yeah. We can't map it out per se in a lab, but it certainly is evident. And I think that gets into a little bit maybe esoteric or eccentric, but it's like that intergenerational trauma too, that we carry from our parents and their parents. I have a patient now who third baby, she's actually a nurse, was so sick during her whole pregnancy. She ended up with a C-section, and every time the surgeons would touch her uterus, she would vomit. And this was like so shocking to the surgeon. They'd never seen anything like this before. Right. So we're talking about, and this patient has a complicated health history. She has tick-borne illness. She has EBV. She has Hashimoto's. She's got long-term kind of growing up in that Puritan culture, which we could probably go down a bunny hole of just a lot of family dynamics as a little girl, very strict upbringing. They were always critical of her weight, just a lot of stuff. Either way, back to the story. So I asked her, said, is there any traumas to the pelvis, any significant pregnancy, sexual history? Nothing. We finally figured out her mom was ran over by a car when she was a little girl. Her pelvis, she was told she would never have children again. I mean, amazing. So we don't know, but it was the weirdest and only connection we could figure out as to why her uterus was so irritated. It's like she's carrying cellular trauma in her body.
Yes.
She also has a very dysfunctional relationship with her mother, right? And we tend to carry those emotions in our female reproductive organs oftentimes.
Yes. Right. And so now when we start talking about all these things that can be happening, like Lyme, mold, all of these things, it can get overwhelming for people. I feel like they're like, oh, I think it's empowering to know, oh, there might be some trauma that might not even be my trauma. I might have, all of that. It could be microbiome, the microbiome that you were passed down from all the generations, but it's also hopeful. So I thought maybe we should talk a little bit about the hope for people, like when you work with people so that they don't get overwhelmed, what do you think is a good way to kind of start with people, or maybe some simple things that they can do to help themselves?
Yeah, I think that's super important, because once you overwhelm, obviously kind of game over, right? You're checked out. So, I think it's important to, like with lab work, for example, let's start with the basics. Let's see where your nutrient depleted. Dietary, again, let's start. Just make sure you're feeding yourself, right? We often talk about the 80-20 rule. People want to be perfect and do everything perfectly all the time, but that's also not sustainable. So finding that balance, doing the simple things, hydrating, eating well, getting outside every day, 10 minutes, that's it. We just a little bit, right? Sleeping, just some of those basic things that you can kind of keep checking. And once you kind of get comfortable with those things, we can start building. But that's, it's important to build a relationship with a patient to know when they're ready. And, there's a two-way street, right? As to not overwhelm. And that's, again, where some of that dismissing comes into play, right? Patients are so worried to say, well, I can't do that, or, and then they get that feedback. So really having that two-way street of communication and having a good relationship with a provider is so important, because you do need that balance. If you do something ahead of the game, they're going to check out, right? You're not ready. And that's okay. And that is okay.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
A big part of that is developing that relationship early on. So first intake with a patient, we're going all the way back to their mom's pregnancy with them. Do you know anything? What was your parents' relationship like? How was your mom's health? Was she stressed or not? How was your labor delivery? How were you as a kiddo, early childhood? Were you a healthy kiddo? Did you get your tonsils out? Did you have a lot of ear infections? Did you feel emotionally supported or emotionally neglected? What's your relationship with your family of origin now? All the way up to how are you sleeping, eating, drinking, hydrating, all that stuff. So you develop that rapport early on and then meet the person where they're at. If you have a busy mom of 4 who is barely holding it together, we're not going to put her on a gluten-free, dairy-free diet with 18 supplements, which we don't do anyway. She has to work out every day. It's like, where is the opportunity, the little gateway to get a little wind in her sails, make her feel a little bit better? And then we compound and we grow on that. With Kale Blossom, we don't have that opportunity to necessarily build rapport.
Right.
So even though we talk about hard subjects and some of it isn't always like puppy dogs and rainbows, we still, and you tell us if not, at the end of the day, we want to create a hopeful, realistic message. It's not all gloom and doom. Start where you are. We can't live in a bubble, all of those things to really connect and make people feel like this is real life and it's okay. There is no right or wrong. We're doing the best that we can, all of us,
Yeah. And I think that's why I really resonate and connect with you two in all of your material too, as I'm the same. I mean, I could get real technical and into the science about why you should do this and this and that, all of the stuff. But at the end of the day, people just need very simple things that they can do. And I think people need to see that it really is okay. Where you are in your journey is where you are. And if it's really difficult, then it's, you can see that even a tiny step is going to make some difference. And I also, the 80-20, I like the 80-20 for moderators. I will say, as somebody who has to watch out for addiction, so that I just want to put it out there that there are certain things that I can't have. Like, it's just, it lights up my brain like a Christmas tree and it becomes this whole thing. So when people are trying to figure that out, to give themselves a lot of grace or patience, because it can be tricky to figure it out. And if you're like, 20% is turning into 80%, and that might be some, and it's completely normal to be addicted to sugar or caffeine or some of these things that are socially acceptable. Like all of my addictions are socially acceptable. And so it took a while for me to realize that, like, this really is actually an addiction. Like, my brain is lighting up in a way that it can't function after that. It's looking for more.
Yeah. And that's a great, point. And again, that's so important, why you build that rapport with somebody.
Right.
To catch that, right? You can kind of see each other, right?
Yeah. And I think that's a balance for all of us, because we are putting things out there and we like to put things out for free so that people could learn and get, and yet you're missing that connection of the rapport that you're building with the clients. And that's why I love the one-on-one work. I love group work too, but I love the one-on-one work because you can ask all of those questions. And really listen to people. And I found that that's probably the most important thing, is that people just really want to feel heard and understood. And that because and the one thing I don't like to see when patients clients come to me and they've had a lot of practitioners that are irritated that they don't follow their suggestions. And I'm always like, no. This is your body. This is your life. If it doesn't resonate with you, we're not doing it. Like, there is always another way. If something isn't feeling quite right, or the opposite, if something feels really healing and good, it's like it's supporting your healing journey, and I say it's not healthy, keep it. If it's working for you, just keep it. But that's something that's always kind of irritating to me, is that when people, well, personally as a patient, when somebody seems irritated that I'm not going to take whatever they suggested, it's like, it doesn't feel right in my body. I'm not going to do it. So
yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's growth as a provider too, right? Early on, sometimes, when you're early on in your career and you think, oh, they didn't do this, they didn't want to do this, but that's something I think you learn too over practice.
We say a lot now, honesty is the best policy. If you didn't feed yourself well in between your last visit now, I want to know about it and I want to hear about it. And you're not going to be shamed. You're not going to be judged. We are simply taking an accurate inventory so that we can build on it
and learn from it.
Yeah. And I wouldn't want anybody to feel like they needed to lie and say, right. Oh, no, I've been drinking lots of water, and you're like, you've got some dehydration symptoms. That's kind of interesting. It's like they haven't actually been drinking the water, and it's okay.
It's relieving to people for somebody to tell them it's okay to be honest. I mean, like the literal like posture change of them relaxing in their seat sometimes when you actually tell them it's okay to be open, you can see it. Really. So it's,
yeah.
Much needed.
Where do y'all fall on supplements? Because I've changed my ways around supplements, and I thought I'd just get your take on it.
I always go by the less is more. I feel like even if it's a natural, the most amazing substance in the world, if we're not getting enough sleep, if we don't have good food in the mix, we don't have movement, we don't have stress management, we can put all the supplements in the mix in the world and we're not going to be at that optimal position of health. So I really try to do 5 or less. That's kind of my rule of thumb. If it's a more aggressive clinical warranting, someone who has a number of infections, they're super depleted, I will have to kind of hit that 5 marker a little bit more, but it's always temporary. And if we don't see changes in progress, we're going to get in and tweak and start pulling back off of. When patients come in, which is kind of a blessing and curse with the supplement industry now because it's so unregulated. And the beautiful part is that people are so much more empowered, the age of technology, they can but everything under the sun is like, oh, that looks good for brain health. Oh, that looks good. And then it's like people come in on tons and tons of supplements. Like that's still burdensome for your liver, your gut, your whole system has to figure out what to do with that and either process or clear. So less is more for sure.
Agree.
I totally agree. Yeah.
Well, and sometimes you can't even, you have to figure out what's working. If you put someone on 20 supplements and, you have no idea what necessarily just helped them or did not help them. So again,
I know.
Yeah.
I know. In my own life, I'm one of those all or nothing kind of, obviously that's part of my issue, but I tend to, like, when I'm not feeling well, I do 15 things. I'm like back on it, and then you're like, what? It's hard to tell what's actually making a difference. And I have seen supplements actually save somebody's life before. So I'm pro medicine too, because there are certain medications that I think can be life-saving. But I really prefer temporary, like you said, Rachel, and I absolutely less is more. But I've learned too, because I know you both probably work with a lot of digestive issues. I've got a lot of digestive people struggling with digestive stuff. And it seems like when you have mental health concerns, you have digestive issues almost always. They go hand in hand. So if we work on the digestion part, often the mental health stuff gets better. So we kind of start with the digestion. And if people aren't digesting well, then it doesn't do a lot of good to throw any supplements anyway. They're not absorbing them. But I have noticed some supplement that helps with digestion for about 3 months maximum. And then I like to pull off to see if the body will start doing what it needs to do. If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Gut health is certainly very, very important to us. And so many people do struggle with gut dysfunction. It's our interface with the outside world. It takes a beating by way of foods, toxins, alcohol, medications, supplements. And I think it continues to be a fascinating organ system that I don't think we know the full gamut of kind of, the details, the inner workings of the microbiome, the gut. And what I really am kind of passionate about, especially right now, is more of that biliary liver tree as a gastrointestinal organ piece. That's very important, and how that's working with the gut tube as well, because we see so many stagnant liver pictures, or maybe they lost their gallbladder, or, and that's a big part of it with that gastrointestinal dysfunction for sure.
Yeah. Do you want to say any more about that, about the liver?
Well, I love the liver. She's so important. And she is our internal waste management system, right?
Yeah.
She's our garbage dumpster, and she needs to be cleared out every once in a while. And I think the more toxic kind of the world becomes, and pesticides and glyphosate and everything else, again, we can't live in a bubble, but if you live in a big city, if you live close to a farm, if you go out and enjoy your world, you're going to be exposed to toxins. So castor oil packs, we're big on those right now. And, castor oil in particular, we talk about this, it's been around for eons. It's one of those ancient healing botanicals or medicinals from nature that I think is something that I would love to scream through a megaphone at the top of a mountain, like, everybody, castor oil for everybody, clean out your liver. And, for a while, those box cleanses were so big, and even cleanses every once, first of the year, it'll be big again. But I think we're kind of going about it in a wrong way in terms of like those box cleanses and all of that. I think the liver deserves more tonification, cleansing by way of course, supporting the gut, castor oil packs, even hot, cold showers, moving your body, hydration, flushing, all of that I think is important.
It's just a really important topic because, like she was saying, we live in a toxic world and we can't run away from it. And, we're just seeing more issues in that department. And how can you support that, in an ongoing, consistent, sustainable way? Because it is such an important part of health that affects the rest of your body. So I think that's a big, topic for health and treatment as we keep moving along.
And we see in those hormonal imbalance pictures, the liver is a key player. And especially women or moms who have that like underlying anger, rage picture, right? They're just kind of like always on edge. In Chinese medicine, the liver is that chamber, the holder of anger. And so those are always clues: painful periods, heavy cramps, clotting when you're bleeding. Those are all signs that we really use as good clinical beacons, navigational treatment wise, in terms of we need to get in and support the liver. I don't know if that answered your question or if we kind of went around.
No, I like that. I thought that's all great, because I think people they're like, I have heavy periods, I have to support the liver. And I just wanted to throw in there the connection with nature. So I have been doing, the dry brushing and all of the castor oil packs. I've got my, I actually move it around. So I just say like over here in the front on the liver, not always on the liver. Because I just think it helps with digestion in general. It's amazing. Yeah. So, but I was missing the connection with nature. I was doing what people do. We go on vacation at the beach, you're outside, but I wasn't like, religious about going outside, being in the sun. I'm religious about sunrise because I think that it's so important to get that early morning light in the eyes, on the skin, so that you set the clock for the day, so that your body starts to realize where it is in time and space, right? And so that's just a piece. I mean, the food, I think being connected to your food, being connected to the people in your life, if they're good for you, people being connected in friendships and all of the things, that connection, and then but also really being connected to nature seems to make almost, it's not that food isn't important, because I think it's super important. Obviously I think it's pretty crucial, but I've noticed that if people will do the other things like getting outside and earthing and using the sunlight throughout the day to help with their hormones, then they can usually get away with eating other, not great. I mean, still eating whole real foods, but more of the 80-20. The 20 isn't really hurting them. So that's my hope, is that, people with histamine reactions and Lyme and mold, the more they can use earth and sunlight, the more they're going to be able to tolerate more, or even like other post-viral syndromes. So, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, all of those kinds of things seem to really benefit from really honoring our circadian rhythm. So.
Absolutely. Agreed. I think we did a poll on one of our Kale Blossom stories recently, and I think 800 people or so, maybe off here, answered. The question was, do you get outside or get outdoors daily? Getting enough outside time? 90% were not. And they were honest. They said no. So that's one of those things, you know, like a house plant usually doesn't always thrive inside unless it's really well cared for. I know I have my own dead house plants,
I know.
but certainly getting outside, fresh air, sunshine and it seems so simple,
It does.
you know, because we have so many technological advances that will blow your mind that are so complicated, and we're this like super what's the word?
We're stimulated.
Yes. And it's like we need this big production of something to help our bodies. It's like, no, let's get back to the basics of this simple, like our ancestors did. They were moseying and walking around outside. And especially with COVID and everybody going indoors, working from home. What about the person that has a moldy home? They're getting sicker and sicker because now they're in even more. They're not getting outside at all. It's like there have been some detrimental parts of that piece for sure that we see.
Yeah.
I think my treatment plans, right? In the last number one is almost always go outside. I think, like you said, everybody's working from home and they expect this laundry list of maybe nutritional things, because I tend to be the nutritional lady.
Yeah, me too.
And it usually tends to be the opposite. Go outside. Again, like you said, don't look at your phone in the morning, you know, things, just the basic things. And it's unexpected, but it makes such a huge difference.
It does. I mean, people are really surprised that I start with sunlight. I think of sunlight as a nutrient. And so, because we've been told to avoid it. And, you know, and I think, you know, it's great that we can do this over Zoom. And so technology is awesome, but turn that stuff off.
Yeah.
Like we're inside in the blue light. I think most people don't realize that the artificial blue light is actually addicting. So it's when you can't put your phone down, that's not by accident. That's not you having no control over yourself. There's actually, your brain is kind of seeking out that blue light, but it's not healthy when it's not in with the rest of the spectrum of light that we find outside. So yeah.
Good point. Yep.
I know.
But I think that's another bunny hole that we're not even there yet is kind of radiation and Wi-Fi exposure. What is this doing? That immediate dopamine release that we're getting.
Right.
And you know, the Wi-Fi regulations are over 25 years old, and they're very outdated, and they're all largely based on like an older white male whose skull is a lot thicker than a woman's skull, and certainly a lot thicker than a child's skull. So we don't know to what extent the Wi-Fi, EMF, the radiation, what exactly it's doing to our cells. So
I know. And it's I'm doing a quantum biology certification right now, and I can just say it's not good. It's not looking good for us in that area. But the more we can get outside, the more we can eat real. I'm really into local and seasonal food if you can. Because it's giving your body the information. Like all of this is trying to orient your body to the time and place. Like what time of day is it? What season are we in? And if we're eating food that's grown or it's in a package, our bodies, of course, our cells are going to be confused. They can't orient. So if that's all that you're in and all that you're eating, that's going to be very confusing. And then we're asking our body to do things, and now you have all these autoimmune issues. It's like the self is not recognizing the self. Like,
exactly. And on that same note, you know, our bandwidth for experiencing joy in the small things, like the changing of the colors of the leaves, it's not quite as joyful when we have an immediate big dopamine release by something that we've seen on our, you know, so it's an unlearning and a relearning. You know, it's an unaddicting and re-addicting to something that is actually helpful to the body.
I love that. Yeah, we're going to re-addict to the healthy, helpful things, because I haven't yet anybody so far that doesn't have some level of addiction to something. You know, but it could be like, I think I'm probably just addicted to going outside in the morning now. It's become such a ritual. I don't think it's an addiction, but it's a really good one if it is. So, but I also can get a little overwhelmed when I think about our kids, like as moms, like you know, that's a bunny hole. I like bunny hole better than rabbit hole, by the way, Rachel. That's very cute. Like, we're just going to go down a little bunny hole instead of like rabbit hole. But I think for moms, well, for anybody, to think about our kiddos and to be, they're pretty I mean, they're all very resilient and resourceful, and I have hope, but I also am concerned because they're all on phone. I mean, even when they're little bitty, to keep them happy, parents are giving them electronic devices. And we all know that's probably not good for the brain and the developing brain. But I think if we can keep our kids outside, if we can get them eating whatever real food they will eat, and just keep them barefoot outside as much as possible. But what else? What am I missing?
Gosh, this is something we talk about, just personally all the time, right? Being a mom is so hard, and finding that balance. And when your children have the outside influences, they go to school and they see all of the other things that are going on, and how do you navigate? I don't think there's an answer to this yet, right? It's kind of figuring it out, but I think it's no different than any of our patients in trying to find that balance and going back to the basics,
Yeah.
And trying to teach them in a healthy way. What healthy way, right? Not why things are important, why drinking water is important, why going out, but I think, again, the basics.
I think a big part of it for sure is the modeling, just
Yes.
like studies have shown, if a child sees their parents reading a book, they're more likely to like reading. Same thing, if a child, they're getting those messages every day, even subconsciously, oh, I see mom drinking water. She drinks her water a lot. I don't see her drinking soda. We're sitting down to eat our food. Those are, I think, the important messages. There's already enough pressure on us as parents to not mess up or ruin our children.
I know.
And I find it very hard. She has 2 children. I have 4 children.
Mm-hmm.
We both have girls. And I think it's for boys and girls for sure. But especially with girls is the body image. And we don't want to say, the way that you frame things, oh, I don't want you to eat that cookie because it's bad for you. Instead, it's like, if you're still hungry, let's have some more dinner and then we'll revisit the cookie. So it's a lot of reframing and nothing about like, body relating it to that, like feeling good in your body, maintaining your health is so important, making choices. But my daughter, my oldest daughter, she said to me recently in the car, because we talk a lot about fingernail polish and makeup, and she said, Mom, when I turn 15, I'm going to buy that toxic makeup because I think it's really pretty. And I'm like, that's okay, Langley. You know what? When you're able to make those choices, that's fine. But it told me that she's hearing that I'm talking about non-toxic. We want to try to avoid the chemicals. And so it's a learning curve, though, for all of us to balance. And how do we not put them in a bubble when we really want to protect them?
Right. And we can't, like we really do. We can't. Mine would be in a bubble right now but you don't want them to be either. I just want them to live healthy, normal lives. And I think the mold toxicity thing has been really shocking to me, is that, that's when I really wanted to put him in a bubble, is when he started having a lot of issues and trying to figure out like what's been going on. And for my son, it was after having COVID. He just his immune system just started having a hard time. And so he was diagnosed with long COVID, which just means we don't know what's wrong with you. So we're just going to keep so trying to navigate that. But that's when we want to put them in a bubbles, when they're having I think anytime, but when they're having a lot of issues, you just want to keep them protected. And I have to keep reminding myself that he's on his own journey, and this must be important in his journey. And so
beautiful way of looking at it. Yeah.
And you model, and I'm also, I think there's probably a comedic YouTube about these kinds of mothers, but I'm like, where are your blue blockers? Are you having your blue blockers on? Oh, sunrise, everybody, sunrise, and they're like, oh, why are you talking to me? But I mean, I think if they may not care, but one day it might circle back like, oh yeah, this is
someday they'll be telling their kids that, and you'll overhear it, and it will be all worth it, right?
Yeah, hopefully, right? That's the hope. But I think that it's just important to really give ourselves a lot of self-compassion.
Yes. Yes. Especially as parents.
I have never seen people being hard on themselves and critical actually work out. It seems to be, in my line of work in clinical mental health for almost 30 years, maybe. it's been when people are gentler and they have a lot of compassion either around them, the support around them, but also that self-compassion, they're able to move through things a lot more fluidly, a lot more with a lot more ease. So I don't know if you see that too, but if people can stop beating up on themselves so much.
Absolutely. That internal critic that we all have, that sometimes is louder than other times, really being able to be aware of that and offering grace and compassion for sure is so, so important. And healing, like you said. I mean, it really does alleviate a lot of that stressful burden that is self-imposed, not to our own fault, but just because we're humans.
Right.
Humans. Yeah. And I think for our children, you said earlier that we can I think you said something about like being able to geek out on this stuff but also like come back to the basics. We love that too. And one thing I like to geek out on is that fetal maternal microchimerism piece that you're probably familiar with, that it helps me as a mom, because that's the phenomenon. When you have a child, you will always have cells of that child in you and vice versa. So you're literally physiologically connected. So when you want the best for them and you want to protect them, even to a fault, and you're like so consumed with their well-being. So you know what? It's a part of being their mom. And it's okay to have all of those feelings. And we can also set it aside and know that what will be will be. And you are doing the best that you can in this moment. And so are they. So,
yeah, 100% agree. And I found that I said this, I used to teach parenting. That was sort of parenting was my thing years ago. I had a book and the whole thing. Cool. And what I would always, I know, I've been doing a lot of different things. And one of the things I would tell parents all the time is that doing my own work, so my own healing work, was the most important thing I did that I've ever done as a mother, to make sure that I'm really, we always say, put your own mask on, put your own oxygen mask on first, so you can't help other people. But truly doing some of the deeper healing seems to really be the most helpful thing that I've done.
Totally agree. Absolutely. So important. Physician heal thyself, we call it, right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So is there anything else that lights y'all up that we haven't talked about, or something that you think, oh, this is really helpful to a lot of patients or clients that maybe people would want to know? Or did we hit on everything?
Oh gosh. Oh, there's so much that we could be lit up and excited about.
I think, and we get a lot of these messages through Kale Blossom on our email and our DM. And we find ourselves repeating a lot, which is fine. But I think, people lose hope. And gosh, I was told there's no hope for me here. I was told this once, twice. There's other people out there that can help you. There's so many resources. And, I think that kind of never give up. There's people that are very willing to help you. You can find some answers. So, I think for me, just for us to give that message of hope and, there's people to trust out there to keep working on your concerns and health issues and whatever it might be. So kind of that never give up mentality. That just really hits me hard when I feel bad. It makes me, when you see that message come through when people are kind of on that give up feeling, it really personally makes me feel terrible. So there's resources.
And Carly is a beautiful example of never giving up. She is a non-quitter, good
maybe
human.
To a fault.
She even got hit by a car and didn't even tell her mom. This girl is brave.
Not like yesterday.
Years ago.
Wow. Yeah.
But to compound on that, that's so true. Giving the message of hope. People that are dismissed. On that note, I think labs, and especially a hormone panel, if everyone could have lab work, detailed, unique biochemical workup every year, find a provider that will do that for you. There's no better way than to gather that data, to be able to track, to prevent disease, to prevent dysfunction, or to help a person that is struggling with a whole host or just a few symptoms, especially in the hormonal realm. It is amazing to me that OBs and gynecologists do not run hormone panels as a standard of care. It should be covered by insurance, should be done every single year, no matter, starting at potentially puberty. I mean, teenage years, absolutely. Imagine if we all had a file of data and could really track. Now, there's a point where we can overdo it. And then I'm not about testing everything under the sun and doing every expensive test on the panel. There are lots of cool specialty tests, and I think they all have their own purpose at a certain point in time. But getting those basics, lab, we always say test, don't guess, for sure.
Right, right. Test, don't guess. And people could get their own tests. Like
Yeah.
I order my own labs, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to know how to interpret them. And so I do think finding a practitioner that can help you is super helpful. But I also think there's just something very empowering about learning. If you know you've got a thyroid issue and you order your own panel and then you do your own research, you know what questions you want to ask of the practitioner. You know where you might need some help interpreting things. But to just go in and have no idea and let them do their 10 or 15 minutes with you once a year is not gonna.
Yeah. Always be your own best patient advocate. Fully agree.
Yeah.
You know, Dr. Google gets a bad rap, not the best doctor in the world, but I think we are at that age where I learned so much from my patients. I mean, they are so knowledgeable and they're empowered. And you're right. If you are empowered with information that pertains to you and your health, which is your greatest asset, you're more likely to move on that and try to find a partnership with someone who will also support and move with you on that, which I think that's what it's all about. That's also how we change the paradigm of our healthcare system here in this country.
Right. When the patients start coming in and asking more questions and asking for certain panels, and then our doctors are going to have to figure that out. Change.
And it's a deeply rooted foundational change, so it's not going to happen overnight. I just spoke at a conference and there was a conventional primary care doc who got up and someone asked, she was also speaking, and someone said, well, how can we change only getting 5 minutes with you guys? And she said, very matter of factly, she was like, well, I'm happy to talk about all your issues. She's like, you're just going to have to make separate appointments every week and you'll keep coming back until we get through the list. And it was like, that's what she knows.
Right.
And it's not until you're outside that you go, whoa, wait a minute. That's why we spend an hour and a half, 2 hours with patients, right? But we're also not beholden to insurance that dictates how providers are able to practice and how they will be, paid, compensated for their time. So definitely important to be your own best patient advocate. Find someone who will sit with you, be with you, spend time with you, get to know you, learn about you, and listen to you.
It's okay to ask questions. It's okay, to be curious, and but I think patients are often just afraid to even ask questions or why, and really to understand the full spectrum of what they could potentially be dealing with too. And that's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to question.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, most people are probably going to have to find a functional medicine doc or naturopathic doc. Somebody's like, this is probably rare to find. You can find integrative folks maybe, but you're going to have to do a little research, I guess is what I'm saying, to find the practitioners that are going to work with you and spend time with you.
I always say you got to find your unicorn. You got to have at least, if you can't have a couple of people in your corner of the ring. I love when someone comes in and they have a great midwife, they have a great chiropractor, they have a good acupuncturist, they're working with me, even primary care, which seems a little excessive. It's not like you're going to see them all the time, but you have this team. I think it takes a village for sure. And that's the way we go about doing good healthcare. That's the way we really make changes for sure. Your unicorn is out there. That's what I always say. Your unicorn is out there. The other thing is we always say, go on to the ifm.org, Institute of Functional Medicine, or naturopathic.org to find a provider in your town, because each one has a find a doc you can put in your zip code and find someone close to you. And then interview. If you don't resonate with someone, even if they are a great doctor and are very highly reputable in your community, it may not be your person, and that's okay too.
Well, do telemed. So, just call and ask. Don't get discouraged if they're not in your immediate area. So.
Yeah, those are great points. And I also think that the relationship is the most important part. And so you can actually like somebody or they can be highly recommended, but if you don't actually resonate and if you are concerned or just not sure about the recommendations, I mean, I think it's fine to say, I don't know if about that, and that's fine to go back and forth. But if you're just consistently not feeling good about the recommendations, it just feels wrong to you, I don't think that's your unicorn.
Mhm.
I think you gotta, you know, even if you like the person, it doesn't necessarily mean they're a good therapeutic fit.
Exactly. And I've had a host of patients who would say, oh, well, have you been to therapy? Yes, I've been to therapy for years. I've had various therapists. Well, did you like any of them? Not really.
Oh no.
Well, then it's like, and do you feel better? Not really. It's like, okay, so this can't be understated, right? Or overstated. You have to find someone that jives and resonates with you for sure.
For sure. Yeah. And there is some cool research too. We won't go into it, but about finding that it's actually a therapeutic fit is where somebody else, they're energetically they're full where you're depleted. And so y'all are a match, as
Love
opposed to being, you know, where if you're both, you know, have the full energy spectrum in the same places, you're not necessarily going to be a therapeutic match. You might like each other and have a lot in common, but that's not going to be like so that you're helping each other. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All
Love
right.
that. Mhm.
I know I've kept you guys for a long time, so I absolutely love talking to you. It's so fun to talk about these things and to know that there are practitioners out there that are unicorns for people. That's so exciting. So yeah, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you, Kelly. It was. Thank you for inviting us.